Hi, I'm Beth Holland of Bread for Life. I'd like to welcome you to Basic Bread. This video is designed to show you how to use your grain mill and DLX to make wonderful, real bread. I will take you step by step through this process exactly as I do at home. So this is the way I store my grain mill at home. I keep it covered to keep dust out. Brush. You can get any kind of pastry brush. This just happens to be a little natural bristled paintbrush. And the first thing that you do to start milling, if you have an old mill, you'll need to clean it. If you have a brand new mill, you don't need to clean it. But what you do need to do is take some flour and put it around the edges so that it doesn't stick to this when you mill. If you don't do that, then you're going to have a hard time getting these two apart. For an old mill, once you've begun to use it, you turn this dial all the way to large. There are a graduation of sizes of dots here. Turn it to large. Put your bent brush, comes just like that. There's a hole in here, and you turn it up and down, just like that. Take it out. There's a hole right here where the separator cup goes. And you can see, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you can see the flour come out. Then I also use this brush, which does not come with your mill, but a pastry brush or a little paintbrush is really inexpensive. And I clean it out because if you've attended my class, you know that oils that oxidize become rancid, and that whole grains are very high, especially wheat, in vitamin E oil, and you don't want to be eating rancid wheat. So I want to get out all this old. Now this has still got flour on it from the last time I milled. And that's exactly the way it is. I clean it off just like this when I mill my flour, but the milling process creates some moisture and some heat, and so it sticks. So the next time that you get ready to use it, it's all dried out, and it comes off much quicker and much more thoroughly. So I brush it down again. I'm going to take this. This has some flour in it left over from the last time I milled, and I'm just going to clean it out. Periodically, I will wash this. Just plain water to get it, all the dust out of the filter, and then I brush this off, just to be real thorough because of the possibility of rancid wheat left over. This hooks on, and you turn it, and turn it firmly, because there's an air intake valve. That's what this is, and you don't want air going, being sucked. You don't want the flour to be sucked up through that air shaft back up into the motor. The other thing I clean out very well is this, and I wipe it out with a towel, and all after I use it, but still there will be a little bit left over, so I brush it out as well. It hooks right together. It has surgical steel pins, and it hooks right back together just like that, and that's what it looks like as I mill. I'm going to clean this old up and move it out. Now, the mill will mill about 10 cups of wheat at a time. This is white wheat. I took it out of my wheat barrel at home, and I don't measure it this way. The DLX lid is perfect for dipping out of the buckets that the wheat comes in. And so that's what I normally do. And I dip about that much. Can you see there's about a ½ inch left at the top? That's about 10 cups of wheat. And that's how I measured at home. I just take my DLX lid to my bucket of wheat, and I dip it down in it, and I take that up. There are some options that you can use when milling your wheat. See if I can get this to reach. And I'm going to turn it this way so you can see it. This is the way it would face me normally. You can add some extras into your bread if you so choose. One of the things that I really like to add is millet, and I do regularly. This is millet, and I'll add about a ½ to 3/4 of a cup to this batch of grain. And I normally put it on top because millet is very light and will blow out of the mill. So I let the heavier wheat be on top of it, and that keeps the millet from bouncing out. You turn on your mill first so that the heads are already working before you put the grain into the mill. And that's what we're going to do. It is a little loud. We've milled, it's totally done. I unplugged it, I wrap up the coil, and I put it up here. And now I'm going to take it apart and show you the flour. Magic Mill 3 Plus is a micronizing mill, which means it gets very, very small particles of flour for you. Now I'm going to brush this off because the bottom of the mill is covered with flour. I brush off the two ends, and then I take the long sides, have it propped up on the flour pan. And all of the excess that I can get off, I'm going to brush down. With this much flour, I have enough to do a double batch. I'm going to do a single batch today, which if you have my cookbook, is 7 cups of flour. It's a single bread recipe. I could double that to 14 cups of flour because those 10 cups will give me 10 cups of grain will give me 14 plus cups of flour. So you've got to have enough to make the bread, you've got to have enough to flour the board and form the loaves or rolls or whatever you're going to make when it's all over and done with. Okay, now this is not going to be perfectly clean, because when I start next time, I will have to brush off more flour that has since dried and will let go of the bottom of this pan. But it is there is a little heat to the process, but it's nothing to be worried about as far as nutrient content goes, because it gives, if heat were a problem, then we wouldn't cook the flour. But we do cook the flour, so I don't think that the little bit of heat that's generated by the milling process is anything with which to be concerned. All right, I'm going to be working backwards, so bear with me. If I have a few problems doing this. This is not the norm for me to work backwards. I plugged in the DLX, and it has a knot in the cord, but we won't worry about it right now. It comes with the lid on top. That's the way I store it. And when I start, I put this all together like that with the roller up against the bowl. There's no tension on the knob. And I do not pre-measure and warm up my things, my ingredients. So my normal process is exactly what I'm going to do for you here today. And that is this. It calls for, oh, there's a piece of grain. It calls for 3 eggs. I normally at home put them in here and put hot water over them and let them sit, and I'm going to do that. Just hot water from the tap. Okay, all I did was run hot water over these eggs until when I feel the eggs, they're warm. They are. I'm going to break them into the pan. I recommend doing eggs first if you add eggs to your bread, for the simple reason that it's easier to fish out the eggshell. I used to put all my other ingredients in first, and once I lost eggshells and milk, and that was no fun trying to get them out. I did. Okay, and there's a teeny bit of shell right there. Nope, it's part of the egg. All right, the next thing I'll do is take my water, and I always take my recipe. This is my cookbook. And even though it's my recipe and I know it real well, sometimes your grain can go on you. And so I always double check what I'm putting in. It says 1.5 cups of hot water. So I'm going to do 1.5 cups of hot water. This is a 2-cup measure. And I use hot tap water. Pour that in. It calls for a cup of milk. And that's this. Pour it in. The warmed up eggs and the warm water and the cold milk all make the exact right temperature for yeast to grow. It really likes that. So that's how I do it. I'll rinse this out so the milk won't harden up in it. Then here's a 1/3 cup measure. I'm going to fill it first. I have oil here and honey. And if you take the lid off both, it's the same measurement in my recipe. It's 1/3 cup of oil and 1/3 cup of honey. I use raw honey. This is wildflower. If you put the honey in right after the oil, it will slide right out. I'll hold this while it drips. Then I'm going to add the yeast. Oops. And we're going to let it proof. And I want you to see what proofed yeast looks like so you'll know if your yeast is alive or not. It's a lot easier to throw out a few eggs, a little milk, water, oil, and honey than it is to throw out all your flour if your yeast isn't going to rise. So I check it ahead of time to make sure that it's active. With the instant actives, you usually don't have too much trouble. I don't buy those little packed strips of 3 because they have a high failure rate. And I don't want to lose my ingredients, so I don't normally use them. I get yeast in bulk and in large packages and use it. Okay, now I have 5 teaspoons of yeast. This is my bulk yeast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teaspoons. I keep my yeast in the refrigerator. It helps it live longer. The DLX has this large stainless steel bowl. It has a roller and a scraper. As the roller turns and does the kneading for you, so your hands don't have to get into the flour, this will scrape down the sides of the bowl, so you don't have to do that either. And it can run totally autonomous with you away from it, and it'll do a beautiful job of making bread. There's a speed control here from fast to slow. I usually start out at about 3 o'clock. And then this one is your timer, and it goes up to 12 minutes. So I'm going to run this around just to mix in the yeast so that it gets wet. And we'll take a quick break while it proofs. This is what the yeast looks like when it's proofed. It's bubbly, and you know that it's alive. Okay, so that's what proofed yeast looks like. Here's my flour. One thing I do, let me slip this over for just a second. One thing I do want to be sure to show you is when I make pastry doughs or something that I want just a really fine flour for, and I'm not too thrilled about having a lot of bran in. If you can see this, this is the bran. It's darker in color. Can you see that there? The outside of the pan, when you mill, you'll see that to the center, there's a darker part. It's coarser when you feel it. That's the bran. Around the outside edges, it will cake even. See how that's caked here around the side? This, when you feel it, is like talcum powder. That's the endosperm. That's what you're used to as white flour. So what you need to do is take from the outside edges if you're going to do something like a pastry dough or something that you don't want that bran in. It's still fresh milk flour, still has all the nutrients, but you won't get that the brittleness to it. It doesn't pastry dough needs more of the endosperm so it holds together better. So you can do that. For bread, I just scoop out of the middle. The neat thing about the design of this mill is that the separator cup is a 1 cup measure. So I'm just going to take out of the middle, bran and all, and I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to start adding. 1, I do not add a level cup, I do add a rounded cup. 2, you need to shake it a little bit to make sure that it fills up all the way down in there. 3, 4. I'll add 4, my total is 7 because that's about halfway through. And then I'm going to move this scraper out a little bit, because as it begins working, it needs a little extra room. Let's see if I can remember how to do this backwards. I move it about an inch outside of away from the edge of the bowl. This is 5. It's a little shy. Nope. 6. And 7. Now you don't have to, but I really, really like the way that this bread is produced if you add some extra lecithin. So I add granulated lecithin. It's a powder. You'll see it. It's kind of orangey. And I'll add about 4 heaping tablespoons. That really helps the texture of the bread. It's a good fat emulsifier. It's good for lowering cholesterol. So that's what I use. And then this is my natural mineral salt. If you come to my classes, we talked about this. It's available through our co-op, as is the lecithin in the grain. It does absorb moisture. It's better for you if your salt absorbs moisture than if it's been heated up so hot that it won't. And I add 1 tablespoon to the batch. It's the last thing I add because yeast does not particularly love salt, but it is necessary for the bread. If you've never eaten bread without salt, well, if you ever do, you'll understand why we're called the salt of the earth. A little goes a long way. Now, I'm going to turn this up, get the stuff in the middle mixed in, and I'm going to turn it up to about 5 o'clock. And then I'm going to try to tilt this DLX up for you to see it run. Can you see it mixing the bread? It's actually kneading the bread. I do not have to knead the bread. It will do it for me. My normal practice is to turn this up to 5 o'clock, turn that up to 12 minutes, take my kitchen timer, set it for 45 minutes. I'll walk away. In 45 minutes, I'll come back and we'll look at the bread and what it's doing, and we'll go from there at that time. Okay. The bread has risen, as you can see, and now I'm going to, I've taken all of this out so that I could tilt it up for you to see better. I'll put this back together. I'm going to turn, it's still set at 5 o'clock. I'm going to turn it on for 4 minutes. And it's going to remix. And then it will rise again. So when I set that timer for 4 minutes, I set this timer for 35 minutes. It will rise, mix for 4, and rise for about 30. And then I'll come back. And it will be risen again. And then we'll be ready to make bread. Okay, this is the end of the second rise. Now, I do a triple rise bread, and the reason I do a triple rise bread is that in the process of the triple rise, there's something called phytates that inhibit the absorption of some of the minerals in which Americans are not well nourished, like zinc and magnesium and manganese and things like that. And a triple rise bread breaks down those phytates, which stop, phytic acid, which stops the absorption of these small elements like zinc. So that's why I do a triple rise bread. I let the first 2 rise in the bowl, and then I will let the last one time rise in the pan. The beauty of this is it's not stuck. So the running around, this is actually kneading the bread like your hands would have to. But the roller doesn't care that there's not a lot of, that it's sticky. And so if you do it by hand, it sticks to your hands real badly, but it doesn't stick to this, as you can see. The side just pulled straight out. And this. This is the paddle that comes with the DLX. And it is curved so that if you do find that there's some dough stuck in here, it goes right down in there and you can clean them out. Some days the dough behaves differently. It almost has a personality. And on some days it's stickier than others. Today is not real sticky. Wet days, it's real sticky. And it may even take like an extra half cup to even a cup of flour. I'm going to flour this board, and I'm going to turn this out. Normally, it's real cool in here today, so I haven't had to be too concerned. Normally, I would put this in a Ziploc bag and put it in my refrigerator, especially in the summertime, because I don't want to leave it sit out and let the oils in it get rancid. I'm going to knead this with the flour that's here. Doesn't take many unless the dough is real wet. And I can feel that it's starting to push back at me. It's a little firmer, and that's what I want. Now, I've made this enough to know that it makes 3 21-ounce loaves. And I have a scale here that I'm going to check them on. That's 21 ounces. This a little over. Oh, and this is a big one, so we've got some extra dough. Let's see. 25, 21, 4 ounces, split 3 ways. May not mess with this one. I'm going to make rolls, so I'll use this larger one for rolls. Let these be the regular size. Let's see. This will take a while if I do that. I'll add 1.5 ounces to each one of these. I'm going to make the rolls first because I'm going to cook them first. They cook at a higher temperature than the bread does. I use 10 steel baking pans. They'll last for your lifetime and many more lifetimes. And you do not get any aluminum oxide like you do off the aluminum pans. I really, really like my 10 steel baking pans. These are going to be 2-ounce rolls. I have made 1-ounce rolls. I have made 1.5 ounce rolls. Hamburgers and hot dogs. Hamburgers I almost always make at least a 3-ounce roll. Depends on how many people you have to feed. And of course you can make the whole loaf, the whole batch of the loaves into rolls if you like. One lady that I know, her family prefers the rolls to the loaf bread, and so that's what she makes. I don't do that because making that many rolls is time consuming and I like fast. So sometimes I make rolls more for special occasions than I do for a daily thing. My daily bread is loaf bread, so we can make sandwiches out of it or garlic toast or whatever it is that we want. Okay. I'm going to flour these and show you how I make rolls. There are lots of different ways to make rolls. My family makes swirls. We used to make bow knot rolls, but my children couldn't make bow knot rolls very well because they were real young and the tying of them was difficult. So this is what we came up with, because you hold your fingers like this, hold the dough, and it gets wider as it goes down your fingers, so it's easy for little kids to do. Bow knot rolls, you just tie like you would tie shoes. Just make that first tie through and leave the ends open. You don't actually tie a bow, but they're called bow knot rolls. You can make 3 individual little balls and put them down into a muffin tin and make Parker House rolls, clover leaves. You can put them in a muffin tin and use a knife or scissors and clip them. And that makes Parker House rolls. You can do them however you want to do them. It really doesn't matter. While I'm thinking about it, let me tell you, I use Pam, and I recommend you buy name brand Pam, because Pam has in it lecithin, grain alcohol, and a propellant. Excuse me, it says right here, canola oil, alcohol from corn, lecithin, and propellant. The propellant and the alcohol you lose, and what you're really left with is canola oil and lecithin. If you look at some of the others, they have other ingredients in them, which you end up ingesting, and I don't think that they're as good a choice. So I do recommend the name brand Pam. If I made a bow knot, I'll just show you. That's what I would do. And when it rises, it would puff up and get real full looking. But my kids don't handle these too well. And these are really fast because we've done them for so long. We're used to them. Okay, I'm going to leave these here and do these during the break while the bread is rising and move on to the bread, because I think you've got this process down. You don't need to sit here and watch me make all these rolls. And I'll show you how I make loaf bread. These are 10 steel loaf pans. They're what I use. I really like them because they're real thick and heavy. The Baker's Secret kind have that coating on them, which flakes off after a period of time. You end up ingesting it. I don't think that's safe. These are real heavy duty, and the bottom part of the bread that's down in the pan stays soft. So you don't end up with a real hard crust, but you get that real soft bread like you're used to in the grocery store. And it's something that my family has really enjoyed. Loaf bread is the easiest thing in the world. I just kind of stretch it to get out all the wrinkles so the top looks nice. And then I keep forming it with my hands until I get a loaf where the edges tuck under well. And it's about the shape that I want. And I put it in the pan. I don't know if you can see that, but it will rise and fill out those ends. I'll do the same thing with this one. Get a little flour so it won't stick to my hands. Once I have a smooth top, I just form it into the size loaf I like. There's a little air bubble there. They're not exact. This is a handmade craft. This one has some air bubbles. If they have air bubbles, just push it down and knead it to get them out. And then just start again. If you leave the air bubbles in, you'll get a thin place in the bread. And you'll also have a place that, if you're making sandwiches with peanut butter and jelly, the jelly will drip through onto the table. Mess for moms, and kids don't particularly like that. If you're making, I'll separate, put these two together. This will be about a 4-ounce roll. But if I were making hamburger buns, which are the most made at our house as far as buns go, we don't eat hot dogs, so I don't do hot dog buns, but I do have them in the cookbook as to how you can make them. Make a ball. And I always try to tuck the raw edges under. I've got a ball of dough. Put the raw edges on the bottom. Flatten it out. When that rises, it'll be a hamburger bun. And then you just cut it in half when it's cooked. So while these rise, I have an oven with the light on. I'll put them in the oven with the light on to rise. They'll rise for 30 minutes or until doubled in size. For these, I want them to be about this high above in the center before I cook them. And then they'll continue to rise while they cook. But I want them to be doubled in size, and sometimes in cold weather, it takes a little bit longer for them to rise than it does in hot weather, even in the oven. But I like to do them in the oven with the light on. If it's real chilly in the house, then I will even turn the oven on for a few seconds just to get it some heat in there, and turn it off and leave the light on and slide them in there. And that's what we're getting ready to do. So when these have risen, we'll come back and we'll show you what they look like before they're to be cooked. Okay? While the bread's rising, I wanted to show you a couple of other things. Normally, I gave you about as basic bread recipe as you can do, except for the addition of the millet and the lecithin. I also, many times, the majority of the time, add something called flax seed. Flax is just a little seed, and I would put around 1/3 of a cup into, that's not 1/3 of a cup, it's 5 1/3 teaspoons. It's normally 1/3 of a cup, but for demonstration purposes, we'll just do 3. I would put them in this blender, which comes with the DLX. It has a safety cap, which normally sits on the side. When I use the blender, I move the safety cap here so nobody's finger can get caught in there. And I turn all the way up to high on the speed and turn it on. And it will quickly powder these seeds, except it has to be plugged in. You'll notice that it started out blowing about, and then it started settling on the sides, and that's when you know it's about done. And it makes a really fine powder, and you can add this into your bread. The beauty of flaxseed is that it's high in omega-3, which is one of the essential fatty acids that we have to live. Its normal sources that we think of are fish. This is a vegetable source of omega-3. It's the highest vegetable source, equal to, and in some ways higher than some fishes. So it's a really good thing to add to your bread. And I did not bring, by any means, all the attachments to the DLX, but I did bring a couple that I use when I make bread or bread-related products. This is one of them. This is a flake mill. You use the lid underneath it to the DLX. And I take oat groats. I make granolas. When we make some breads call for oatmeal. Cookies call for oatmeal many times. Turn the speed control down. You can run at full speed, but I don't. Turn it on. Just pour them in. And on the other side, out come rolled oats. Those last ones down in there. When this is done, I'll hold them up and let you see them. Kind of neat looking. And the same reason for milling to retain the nutrients is the same reason that we roll our own grains. You can roll wheat in here, any of the grains except corn. You can roll because corn's too hard. But there are oat groats that have been rolled into oatmeal. And they are so neat. They taste good. They make the best oatmeal in the mornings. My kids love them. And we'll take dehydrated apple powder and sprinkle in here with a little sucanat, which is dehydrated sugarcane juice. I use this as a substitute for brown sugar because brown sugar is refined. Excuse me. And this is not. And just cook it like regular oats. The proportion is, I've forgotten all of a sudden. I think it's 2-to-1, and corn is 3-to-1. Corn's 4-to-1. Okay, I'll pour these out of this DLX lid and change attachments. Let me show you the cleanup on this one while we have this one out here, because it's very, very easy. You unscrew these little knobs. The front comes off. Work it off. And you can pull this out and just brush it off. The reason, once again, to remove that matter is because there is oil in grains and it can become rancid. You don't want to eat rancid oils because they can be carcinogenic, so you want to get rid of them. And that's it. I'm the type of person who doesn't like to clean, and so if it doesn't have an easy cleanup, I will not get it out and use it. And I love these attachments because they do have an easy cleanup. This is called the Branded Spice Mill. I'm going to make grits for you in it. It will make coffee. It will make ground spices, allspice, nutmeg, any of your hard spices, not herbs, but hard spices. And but it makes the best grits. They're yellow if you use yellow corn. They're white if you use white corn. And they have a wonderful flavor. I turn corn all the way down to slow. This has a dial on it, and I open it to number 4. It's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and it tells you which way to turn it for larger and smaller. I turn it to 4 and run it through. You'll hear it cracking the grain. Turn it off, dial it all the way to 2, and run it back through. Corn is the only thing that you have to run through twice. But because of the size of corn, you do have to do that to it. The other things will mill through the first time on whatever size you want them to. Just corn has to be done on first large and then small. And this time through, we have grits. Make sure that the products that you get are well cleaned. You cannot just go to a feed store and buy grain. You have to buy triple cleansed grain at least. The grain that we buy is quadruply cleansed, and they give us a nutritional breakdown on each bucket. So if your corn is not dry, you cannot put it through some of these attachments, and you cannot put it at all through the mill because the moisture will gunk up the milling heads, and you don't want to do that. The mill has a 3-year warranty. The DLX has a 3-year warranty. There's some of the best warranties out there for mills and mixers. And this is almost through. Let's just get those last few pieces in. And this is not enough to make much of anything with, but it's enough for you to see. So, I'll hold this up with my hand. See if I can, if you can see better. I don't know if you can unless I hold it. This is grits. They're coarse, they're fresh, they smell nice, and they have a wonderful flavor. For every cup of grits, you use 4 cups of water. For every quarter cup of grits, you use 1 cup of water. So it's real easy. Add a little salt into it and add them in with a wire whisk, a little bit at a time so you don't get lumpy grits. Grits and eggs and biscuits are some of my family's favorite winter eating for an evening meal. And it's real fast and real easy to produce with the DLX. When we come back, we should have risen bread ready to go in the oven. Well, as you can see, the bread has risen. It's real high above the pans, and it's filled out the length of the pans, and that's what we want. This is white wheat. You can tell it has sort of a golden cast to it. You can make bread out of red wheat. You can make it out of white wheat as long as it's a hard wheat. Soft wheat does not have the gluten capacity for the bread to rise. The bread rising, what happens is that the yeast is feeding on the sugars. One of the byproducts is a carbon gas that expands and creates the cells in the bread. And what you hope for are small cells of fine textured bread. With the micronizing mill that the Magic Mill 3 Plus is, you can get that product out of whole grains. So now I'm ready to put this into an oven, and I put it into a 350-degree oven for 25 minutes. And I will show you what they look like when they come out. In the meantime, the rolls are back here, and they will be rising because I formed them after I formed these for you. I formed the rest of those off camera, and they need a little more rising time. So they'll be sitting there rising, and then we will cook them and show you their finished product. So we'll put these in this oven. Try not to bump the bread because it can fall. And you don't want the pans touching the oven or each other. And then we will set this timer, which is ticking, for 25 minutes. And at the end of 25 minutes, we'll come back and show you the bread. Okay, we have the bread. It's cooked. As you can tell, it's quite lovely in size. And I'll put them on these racks to cool. They come right out of the loaf pans. And I'll let them cool while I'm cooking the rolls. And I'll show you the rolls before they go in the oven, what they look like when they're risen. They're a lot larger than they were when we started. I got a baker's dozen with 2-ounce rolls. And they go in the oven and cook at 400 for 10 minutes. So I will set this for 10 minutes. And when they're done, they'll come out. I did want to show you the grain and spice mill. I showed you the cleanup on the flake mill. Didn't show you the cleanup on the grain and spice mill. It comes apart just like this. You can brush out the corkscrew part. These two pieces come apart and can be brushed apart and then slid back in. This goes on. This is your dial. It has a little tooth there that it hangs on. And then this collar goes back on. And that's it. That's the whole cleanup. It's really easy. So when we come back, we'll have the rolls coming out of the oven and we will slice the bread and we'll be done. All right, the rolls are finished and we have a baker's dozen here and they're still warm, fresh out of the oven. I'm going to break one apart for you and let you see how soft they are. They're really soft. They're hot. They're steaming. And it's a great time to butter them with some fresh turned butter. We took them out a little bit early. That's okay. The oven was getting really warm. That's a long ring timer. I need those to keep me from forgetting that they're coming out. This is a good time to butter these, as I said, and they're really delightful rolls to serve with a nice dinner. I wait until the bread has cooled some to slice it so that I get a good slice, otherwise it will kind of crumble and tear apart. I think you can see, I'll bring it around there, the texture of this bread is very fine and it's very, very soft. And can you see that? It's nice and golden on the outside and nice texture here. This is torn. There's the real texture. It was torn from the blade because it's still warm. So that's the bread that we've done. The nice texture we get from the kneading action of that roller. It redistributes the yeast. That's why we punch it down so many times and remix it so that it redistributes that yeast and you get a really good texture like this. It smells wonderful. Wait until it is pretty well all the way cooled before you slice it so that you don't get any tearing. And you can slice very thin slices like this, just like grocery store thin sliced bread, out of this bread with a good knife. Make sure that your knife has a serrated edge like this and that it doesn't have one of those that has the close little lines together that go like this. Those tear up the bread. This is a bread knife and this is what you want to get. And so I hope that you have a wonderful time with your bread baking. If you're interested in more advanced or different ways to go about making your bread, we'll have an advanced video that's going to show biscuits and filled bread and cinnamon rolls and Danish and a whole wide variety of different types of bread. But on this basic video, I hope you've learned how to use your grain mill and how to use your DLX to your best advantage to help you produce real bread for your family.